Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Welcome everybody. Let us continue on our journey of IKS, Indic Humanities Studies. And over to you, Srini Mahoday.
Namaste, Arabia. So in the last classes, we touched upon the topic of introducing Mimamsa and the application of Mimamsa and all that. And most importantly, why it helps and how it helps. So in life, we go through many small decisions. But while making those small decisions, we do not know how it's going to affect I will be in a total control of the situation after a long period of time. There are many small choices that we make, and many are optional or impulsive, but even though they look small, they look minute, but they seem to be crowding us with so much of information. And what is primary and what is the most important task that gets delayed or displaced. And the result is the duty, the concept of duty itself weakens, the confusion grows, and the order collapses. For example, we see messages, we have social media, endless browsing, snacks, coffee, shopping, deals, and the moment you open your laptop and there is a phone ringing, and again, there is something pending, which could be your work or your learning and family duties and responsibilities. And of course, you have to keep your promises. So the problem is not that every small act is so dramatic that you know what's going to happen. When you're actually executing that small task, or just probably one little browsing, it just takes a few moments away. Let me read this news and come back. At that moment, it appears very small and nothing dramatic about it. But there will be many choices like that. And many of those choices can actually be impulsive or can actually be controlled by the environment outside. The cumulative effect is that it will be silently replacing or actually displacing what ought to be done. So, this is where Mimamsa was correcting to classify uh, the actions, the very actions as vidhi versus preference. It's all about, is this actually, you know, injunctive or enjoined or merely something that I feel like doing? Is it something that needs to be done, or am I feeling that something else is important? So that should be classified. And of course, they classified the act as a regular duty, an occasion based duty, which were called Nitya, Naimittika, and Kamya. Nitya is the regular duty. You got to do what you got to do every day, right? Probably brushing your teeth and things like that. Naimittika is the occasional duty. Maybe you have to attend a school ceremony, or when it comes to the Vedic injunctions, it's probably a festival, and or things that need to be done at a certain date and time. Kamya is what is desired. It's not something that you want every moment, every day, but you will have this big desire, and that desire driven action should also be classified, and they did so as Nitya, Naimittika, and Kamya. So they did classify and distinguish what is primary from what is merely secondary. And of course, what is Nisheda, asking whether the choice, so a certain choice obstructs or violates what ought not be done. So the practical result is we do what is primary first. Do not treat every preference as equal to duty. Let the, let the optional acts remain subordinate to the primary acts and preserve order in action. These simple things would actually keep an order in life. So without Mimamsa, every choice feels urgent. Every choice, whether it is impulsive or from someone else or something else in the environment, feels really important. And preference looks like duty. You see that there is a difference between action based on preference, my feeling, or your feeling, versus what needs to be done. So small acts crowd, but the primary, it's crowd out the primary, and life fragments into distractions. So with Mimamsa, we classify it and classify it based on the order of preference, primary first and the secondary next, tertiary third. And duty is protected from drift. Action becomes order. So therefore, Mimamsa does not let preference stand on the same level as duty. So its strength is in classifying the acts as Vidhi, Nisheda, Nitya, Naimittika, and Kamya, which is enjoined or injunctive, what needs to be done, prohibited, what should not be done, regular, what you got to do every day, and occasional as well as desired. So they all need to be seen from the lens of primary and subordinate. So, so the lens of Mimamsa on the tyranny of small decision is not that the issue is small in size, but they constantly warn about the displacement. So what Mimamsa teaches is the discipline and cultivating a mindset to carry out actions that are so focused away from all distractions. A quick distraction or a comfort or preference is to be seen as it is, and repetition, what was, if you keep repeating the same small decisions, it becomes what used to be occasional. Hey, let's go for a coffee, let's go for a tea. When you're working on a task, so that kind of a repetition, or even simple browsing, that occasional, what was occasional becomes a pattern, and that pattern over time, these what was optional begins to occupy the place of the primary. That is when the disorder happens. The weakening of duty and fragmentation of attention is disorder. So that is when action loses power as well as order. And so the decision test is to ask ourselves, is this vidhi or enjoined or just my preference? And what kind of act is this? Is this regular, occasional, or desired? Because not all actions stand on the same level. And we also have different technical terms, which we covered in the previous classes. So the secondary must not occupy the place of the primary. And that is of great importance, because whatever is primary, with those small decisions, with its cumulative effect of small decisions or the tyranny of small decisions, they will, not it's not they may, but they will displace the primary or the pradhana. So what must be avoided is to be completely with full awareness, should be seen as whether this act obstructs, weaken, or violate what ought not be done. Therefore, because some choices are not harmless, they quietly obstruct duty. For example, this is, I mean, almost all of us have gone through this thing. You sit down to study, work, or care. Even for us, for your own family, or just to keep a promise, the small choice appears in the form of, oh, let me just check the phone for my WhatsApp message. And probably you see it, and there is a question about an event, whether you're going to come or not. So you start answering it, and there is an answer back, and suddenly there is another status appearing, and the status, you click on it, it goes to maybe another browser, and then you see something about politics or a movie or whatever, and that's it. Another 10 to 15 minutes gone, and you come back, everything is normal. You feel as though it's all normal, but what has happened to the brain and the neurochemicals, it's a chaos at that point. So this repetition is, what they're cautioning against. Uh, that's why the Mimamsakas, when it comes to Vidya and the Nishedas, are super strict about it. Therefore, the issue is not that the act is small. The issue is that what is optional is beginning to displace what is Vidhi. And the secondary, which is to be just called Anga, or some a part of the work, is replacing the primary, and the secondary is beginning to replace the primary. So here, the help of Mimamsa is it will never let preference stand on the same level as duty. So, with that lens, you will be able to understand the epics, the kavyas, or the heroic deeds of many, many wonderful characters. You see, a small issue, let's say, very, very, an emotion of jealousy, let's say, it starts with comparison, very slight. And that slight comparison actually causes a bit of insecurity. You won't be able to detect it. You won't even know whether you have jealousy. It starts with the question, why them, not me? Why that person, not me? Why that lady, not me? And if I sense there is some kind of a loss, I cannot accept being lesser. And that is when ego is coming in. You see, the jealousy is rationalized by the feeling of identity with a particular position or status or a role, which is where the ego is playing its role. And that ego, probably because of that ego, you said something or you thought something, and the pride comes in saying that I will not bend, apologize, or correct myself. At that point, when a person with great pride is speaking, his or her mind, you do notice that the room goes quiet. No one speaks up when dharma is at stake. That was seen in the epic of Mahabharata. What started as a small comparison, a slight insecurity, or a hurt feeling, which was, in the form of jealousy, grew into ego, pride, and silence when awareness had to be there, but silence came in that place, and resentment grew, which is the unhealed hurt becomes stored hostility, leading to an unresolved inner weakness becoming outer destruction, humiliation, injustice, broken trust, leading to war. So, what Mahabharata is teaching is that comparison leading to jealousy, the wounded ego, pride, silence, resentment, injustice, leading to one of the biggest conflicts that we ever know in the epics, or at least in the history of epics, or in the substance of epics. So, how to stop this spiral very early? With self awareness, notice the spark before it grows, stay grounded, honor others' success, which is humility. And if you do know where you stand, and if you stay grounded and recognize that the spark is growing with comparison, immediately, if you have that sense of wonder, sense of appreciation, it suddenly results in humility. And, and if you do notice a certain pride growing inside, talking early, or clarity, which is the guna of sattva, that clarity prevents further escalation. And making sure that we stand up and speak at the right time, in the right place for dharma. Correction of a small thing begins very early, and these corrections prevent great consequences because the great conflicts do not always begin with great causes. They often begin with small emotions that are left unchecked. If you look at that Bhagavad Gita emotion map as well, the emotional crisis of Arjuna is so overwhelming before the battle. So there's grief, right? And he's worrying about the grief, and the root cause identified as attachment to relations, which is moha. And there is fear of losing the dear ones, and that is fear of consequences. And there is pity that I have to give up so many things and I have to lose so many things, even though I have been wronged and I try to do good, but here's what's happening. So that pity, that self pity or pity for others, is all about ego identity, right? And there is moral confusion and, of course, paralysis of making a decision, which is he is Arjuna was not acting based on duty or what ought to be done, but it was all about what feels right at the moment. So that is why it is called Prakrita Karunya, where it's materialistic compassion. So at the time of battle, because it was his feeling that gave a sense of right. When you do see many people justifying it, right? That was aversion to suffering, which actually was displacing duty. And if you apply the lens of gunas, it was, we do know that the sattva, rajas, tamas are existing in every human being, or every being for that matter. And tamas was resulting in the feeling of despair, withdrawal, inertia, and helplessness. Whereas rajas was all about agitation, anxiety. When he says that I'm trembling and I don't know what happens. Because so many thoughts are coming in and going out, and at the same time, his body was shaking and he was sweating. The feeling of anxiety, and of course, there was feeling of attachment, raga, dvesha, and then conflict. They're all because of the rajas. And sattva is about balancing the tamas and the rajas. It's all about clarity, good balance, courage, and equanimity. Equanimity is taking things in stride. And Krishna was guiding about knowing the self, performing swadharma, acting without moha, steadying the mind, seeing with wisdom, and surrendering through bhakti. And the transformation path was, if you look at the emotion, what actually happened, it started with despair, and there was a lot of confusion. Questioning happened, and insight occurred, and there was a steadiness within Arjuna, which propelled him to right action. So, application to daily life is that you do see, or we all see, conflict at work, and the trap is always ego and anger. So, the Gita's response is acting with clarity and not reactions. For example, there is family tension. That's another situation. That is, you know, husband and wife quarrel or argue about their kids' well-being. You do see that, and most of the quarrels they happen to be around that, and that's because of attachment. You said, I said, you said, and then the feeling of hurt. The Gita's response is responding, response with steadiness. The fear of failure, which is about any decision for that matter, and that's because of anxiety. You know, the fear of failure, and fear of the unknown, fear of the future. So, focusing on the action and not on the outcome removes a lot of tension. And of course, there is moral dilemma between two good actions, or you know, within the same role. Which one is right? That is confusion, and dharma, or many techniques of mimamsa, Vedanta, they all help in figuring out what is dharma with discernment. And if the situation is all about stress and overload, the trap is restlessness. You do see people doing too many things, highly stressed, overloaded, keeping themselves busy. Busy with busy with what? A feeling of stress and overload. And all our dharma shastras as well as Gita, and many incidents within Mahabharata, we see disciplining the mind and the senses are given primal importance. So the entire Bhagavad Gita, even though it can be seen as in one aspect as a decision making manual, it does not suppress emotion at any point. It transforms the emotion through wisdom, discipline, devotion, and right action. So, from triggering of the emotion to gunas, reflection, and the choices we make will result in the action and builds character over time. And this emotion map, what we saw here, from small emotion to great conflict, and how Bhagavad Gita identifies the emotional crisis, the root causes, and gives a recommendation for life, that can be seen in the epic of Mahabharata. It's a great synthesis because the epic uses the complexity of life, and they cover about four generations completely, four stages of life, and the complexity does not result in some kind of fragmentation, but integrates all of life into a hierarchical vision for the human purpose of moksha or self realization. which is the very purpose of aligning with the cosmic order, which we call Dharma. And when it comes to Mahabharata, uh, V.S. Suktankar has written a wonderful, wonderful book called On the Meaning of Mahabharata. And most of the material that you're going to see is from that book because he advocates of why Mahabharata was written and what's its purpose, how integrated it is for and serves as a life guiding manual. It is even see the narrative is the foundation. In the earlier uh, parts of the first millennia, it was called Jaya. They say not as Mahabharata, but it was later called Mahabharata, but it was called Jaya, and it had the stories of Shakuntala and Alata Damayanti establishing the context and the human drama. And then the epic Mahabharata is synthesizing and integrating diverse philosophical currents. You do see many, many. Now, whatever we studied in the Shaddarshana, integrating those philosophical currents, Dharma Shastras, and serves as a cultural memory for, for the entire nation, for the entire civilization. So that's it actually gives a total vision of Indian life. It is not something that you can easily compare with Greek epics or any other epic for that matter. Even though at the outset it appears like a conflict between two um, groups of cousins, right? Uh, it does, the story goes through the fourfold purushartha, what we call purusharthas, kama, artha, dharma, and moksha. The core purpose is to teach everything about purushartha. As I say, and the Vyasa himself says that there is nothing, whatever exists in the Mahabharata may exist elsewhere in the subject of purusharthas, whether it is kama, artha, dharma, or moksha. Whatever exists in Mahabharata may exist elsewhere. What does not exist in the Mahabharata exists nowhere. So the focus on duty, resolution, or what we call dharma, nivritti, and the liberation, resolution of all conflicts through higher knowledge is advocated in the Mahabharata. And Suktankar identifies it in his wonderfully written few pages of the text. And from that chapter, uh, the lecture is divided into a few parts like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He has brought whatever we have discussed, and given a lot of insights into this thing. So before we go into this subject, and it starts unfolding in layers. But do you have a question at this point? Just wanted to sort of re-establish a communication and to see where we are. Anything you want to say at this point?
G on the mountain chart, um, the the split between the one on the previous slide,
Okay.
two slides prior, I think.
Okay.
This is very cool in terms of like progression of thought, because in our class we started off with Purushartha as the foundation, the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah.
And then this kind of connects all the dots.
Everything is connected. Yes. Yeah. It's a synthesis.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's very very cool depiction. I just wanted
Yeah.
to kind
I
of
mean, that is the,
start.
which author would write the very first verse as Dharme cha arthe cha kame cha mokshe cha bharatarshava yadi hasti tadanyatra yanneha na tad kvachit. What a, now look at the humility when he says whatever exists here may exist elsewhere. He's not denying it. It may exist. What does not exist in the Mahabharata exists nowhere. That is humility with confidence. Okay. So you had a question here too?
No, no, G, I think you already summarized this in prior classes.
Yeah.
The we've sort of followed this pathway in terms of several previous classes in terms of the guna.
Mhm.
Triguna actually is self-identity. It's a root of self-identity and keeping a
Yes.
constant check. So that kind of recaps.
Yeah. You see how Sankhya gets connected through, because I say all of these things because you do see how Suktanka starts answering it. Okay. Wonderfully. And yeah, another question?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the again the Gita is fairly comprehensive, and it
Mhm.
also touches upon within the yoga, or at least I shouldn't probably say that, but it touches upon four paths or four yogas, right? Bhakti yoga, Jnana yoga,
Mhm.
Karma yoga, Raja yoga,
Mhm. Mhm.
as a means to
Yeah. It is a
achieve
moksha
moksha.
shastra. Yeah.
Moksha. So, uh, is there any prior references to these types of pathways?
Upanishads.
Okay.
Yeah.
Upanishads are primarily focused on Jnana yoga. Is that a correct understanding?
Well, I mean, okay, Upanishads, you can't say it's all Jnana Yoga because Upanishads is what we consider as a Vedanta, the end of the Vedas, and the interpretation have been made in these pathways. So there are Bhakti Vedantins, right? And the Vedantins of Jnana, Vedantins of Yoga, and things like that. So the interpretation, what we have is purely, the Vedanta led to Bhakti interpretation after 12th century, um, and that is predominantly seen as Bhakti oriented, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it exists, but the way you see it through Jnana, Karma, Bhakti, that is left to the groups and the individuals, and they have interpreted in various ways.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, they're mostly, I mean, you could say they're metaphysical in nature, and the interpretation. Ours is an interpretative tradition, so people have interpreted in whatever yoga or whatever mindset that was predominantly orienting towards these yogas, and interpretation happens that way. Okay.
Mahoday, how can we apply the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, to transform emotions? Like earlier, it was to make a decision
Yeah.
framework, but how to transform emotions
So how would
using
yeah. So raga and the dvesha, they are identified as the attachment, and attachment is the craving and aversion, right? Raga and the dvesha, and how to eliminate the raga and the dvesha, and how to raise sattva to balance rajas and tamas. And that's how you balance all kinds of moods and emotions. Scientifically speaking, uh, you do the pranayama and pratyahara asana, all those kind of things, right? Even scientifically, when deep breathing actually puts you into a parasympathetic nervous system mode from the sympathetic nervous system mode, which is default, now where flight and fight response is default. But the moment you start with the deep breathing, diaphragmic breathing, it puts you into the parasympathetic mode, relax and respond. Right? That itself is sending you, you could say that it is sending you into that, positions you in that sattvic mode, where the moment you are out of the stress response, you are in the relaxation, and instead of stress and reaction and anxiety, you are in relaxed mood, and you have a responsive mindset at that point, not reactive mindset. So that itself is sort of elevating you to a different level of sattvic mode. That helps in better decision making, right? Yes, Modi?
Yeah, so in a physics term, I would say sattvic mode is the fulcrum, and then the rajas and tamas on both sides.
Oh, yeah. You could say, yeah.
Just an
Sattvic,
analogy.
sattvic is considered a guna more than a state of the mind. You can say, yes, you can reach the state of sattvic, you can reach sattvic state, because, and as a guna, as an attribute, it exists. It's
Okay.
not just a state, but also an attribute. Sattva, rajas, and tamas.
Gotcha. So it's
Because
more
I
like
just
a
want to.
triangle. It's a more triangle and a dot in between.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
it's
The moment
part-
we say fulcrum, it may be misunderstood as just a state. The moment you balance with the viveka, and then it's that state is called sattva, and one may come to that conclusion. But actually, it is considered a guna, right? It's
Right.
an attribute that exists, not just a state to be reached.
Gotcha. Thanks
Yeah.
for the clarification. That really helps.
Okay. All right. So V.S. Suktankar, an Indologist, a great scholar, a mathematician, and a Sanskritist, he worked in the critical edition of Mahabharata. So with that level of his knowledge and precision, he wrote the critical edition, but also this wonderful book called On the Meaning of Mahabharata. And this lecture, he starts with, is the Mahabharata a chaotic compilation? Because there are many allegations from the outsiders, and of course the insiders too, because people see that as a family conflict for some real estate possession. Is that right? So why is there a big epic? Because families go through that thing and there's a conflict. It's all about who wants that land. We've seen this thing, and what's the big deal? Suktankar says, he starts with the question, is the Mahabharata a chaotic compilation or a unified work with deeper meaning? Right? Modern critics would say, oh, it was just a smaller heroic war epic, expanded by later additions, lots and lots of additions that happened from all the way to the first century to the later parts of the first millennia. And they have added philosophy, theology, dharma, and all that as secondary. The goal is we have to work towards recovering that original epic. And people have objected to, it's of great size, 100,000 verses and all that. It is unnecessary. There's so many upakhyanas, what is considered essentially as upakhyanas, which is those stories. Now, one person telling the story, and that story goes into another story. It's nested stories, right? People have objected to that thing too, saying there are frequent digressions. It's too didactic, very academic and philosophical passages. It's all about religion and dharma related material, those kind of things. And Suktankar says that you have to read the Mahabharata as we have it. Its layers are meaningful and not accidental clutter. The ethical and the spiritual dimensions are very essential. Its greatness does not lie in the the greatness lies in its vastness with integrated vision, not just its mahatvad, bharavatvad, iti Mahabharatam. It's so huge. Therefore, it is called Mahabharata, is one etymological meaning assigned to the text Mahabharata. And so it's vast. It's really vast. But Suktankar says that it provides you an integrated vision. Yes, others have done it in the past. He compiled it in its text called The Meaning of Mahabharata. The critics have they have looked for the original epic, which they say about 26,000 verses called Jaya or so, and the remaining 100,000 or 80,000 plus is they're all later additions. Suktankar says, right, he interprets the whole thing, and he sees the material as central to the meaning, right? And the critics judge by narrow epic standards. So they come from the point of view of Western epics. But Suktankar says you will have to understand it on its own terms. Example, critics are very highly, they question things like how can a Bhagavad Gita happen if simply to read the Bhagavad Gita it would take like 4 hours. It's an interruption to a battle story. Right? Suktankar says the key that reveals the deeper meaning of the battle is there in it. And then why it matters. The Mahabharata is not merely a war narrative, it's a vision of life, heroic, ethical, and spiritual. In his lecture, he clears the ground for a larger reading of the epic on 3 planes: the mundane, which is Laukika, the ethical, which is Dharmic, and metaphysical, which is transcendental. You see, just to see Mahabharata at a very Laukika level, it's a dynastic struggle, even though they all come from the same Kuru lineage. It's a conflict between Pandavas and the Kauravas for kingdom, honor, and power, and so on and so forth. The main causes of the conflict is the rivalry between the Kuru family groups. So there is dice game and Draupadi's humiliation, and refuse to restore justice after the exile of the Pandavas. They did not keep the promise. And we have so many human characters, and they're not perfect in any way, shape, or form. Yudhishthira is highly dharma-minded, but flawed. And Duryodhana is highly ambitious, but jealous. Bhishma is highly noble, but he has this concept of loyalty over honesty. Right? He is bound by the duty and also loyalty. There is Karna, who is loyal, tragic, and always conflicted. Draupadi has been humiliated, and she is the center of justice, and she plays a very powerful role in the Mahabharata epic. Krishna acts as the guide and the strategist. So how do you see that with karma and consequences? The war is not just just a random fate. People are making decisions, small to big, right? It grows from choices. Many times, many times, they are impulsive choices and vows. And these vows are of the moment. And did Bhishma know what his vow going to cause and what kind of consequences it will have? No. Even the vow of Bhishma changes the direction of the epic. There's pride, there's a lot of moha, pride, moha, and of course the weaknesses. And every action is creating consequence. So how do we apply to real life? How a certain inner conflict is resulting in a family rivalry, right? In modern application, you do see conflict, the inner conflict resulting in family conflicts or community conflicts. And there is a dice game in Mahabharata, which is like the peak at the very center of the epic. And so what's happening there is just bad decisions, one after the other, under stress, under pressure. And Duryodhana's jealousy is all about ego and comparison. And Bhishma's silence is about knowing what is right but not acting. See, that's happening in the modern life. Right? Draupadi's humiliation is the injustice and the injustice that's happening, and the need to speak up won't happen at the right time or in that place. War's destruction is parallel to consequences of unresolved conflict. So the key takeaway is that great conflicts often begin with ordinary human weaknesses. Pride, jealousy, silence, attachment, and poor judgment. So the Mahabharata is always reminding us that unresolved conflict, ego, silence, all of that can destroy the individual, families, which will result in communities, the destruction of the communities and the societies. So from human weakness to a war. So that is the bridge which is constructed in the Mahabharata epic, basically teaching about life. Human weakness, family rivalry, injustice, exile, broken trust, war. This is how the narrative is going on a mundane plane. But look what's happening. This is what you read in the story. This is the mundane plane or the direct meaning of the story. Right? And on the ethical plane, it is operating differently. The central question, it's we are Suktankar, interpreting Mahabharata in 3 layers. But the second layer is on the ethical plane or the dharmic plane. He says the Mahabharata is not only about war. It is asking, when injustice arises, will human beings choose dharma or yield to adharma? Because it appears easy, it's convenient. You can actually break your convictions, and it appears convenient. You get a lot of support, and many times you do see people getting great benefits of that support. And you are seeing those kind of examples. So should I follow that thing? Right? Because the faces of adharma in the epic is that Duryodhana has greed and pride. Shakuni is deceit. That is told. There is dice game happening, and humiliation happening, and Dhritarashtra's blindness. It's not just physical blindness, you see. It's also moral blindness and his weaknesses. And of course, everybody knows and everybody is qualified, but they all are silent in the face of wrong. By the way, Bhishma also wrote not just Dharma Shastras but also Artha Shastra. Right? And Chanakya is quoting Bhishma's Artha Shastra in his text. Very, very qualified people. And in moral crisis, Yudhishthira is bound to Dharma, yet morally tested. He's the one suffering. Draupadi, she has become the voice of injustice and, of course, wounded dignity. And Bhishma is compromised by silence, and Krishna is coming and helping, and Vidura is acting as the clear conscience, and he is the Viveka, right? He's seen, and he's a good person but can't act. He has no power to act. Nobody listens to him, and he even speaks when it was needed, unlike Bhishma. Vidura speaks, and dharma and adharma in conflict, you do see the conflict is not just political, it's moral struggle between justice and injustice, dharma and adharma. See, this is what Suktankar is identifying as, and the epic is connected through these conflicts. And it is between justice and injustice, duty and impulsive or selfishness, impulsive decision making, which is purely selfish, and moral courage and moral failure. Adharma and dharma, they've been conflicting all the time. And you do see Pandavas more in alignment with dharma. You don't have to have this, there's no concept of black and white, there's no concept of good and evil, and things like that. It's the balance, the imbalance of the gunas. An application to real life is dice game is all about, it's parallel to unethical choices under pressure. Right? Look at the connection. Unethical choices under pressure. Trading brothers, trading wife. And Draupadi's humiliation is, she's the only person speaking against injustice with no support. She even asks Yudhishthira whether you lost me, you traded me before you became a slave, or after you became a slave. How did you do that? And silence, Bhishma's silence is, or everybody's silence in the court, is the danger of passive goodness. See, the passive goodness is something which we don't recognize at all. Passive goodness is still seen as, oh, he's a good person because you just want to appear good. And that is considered a dharma in the Mahabharata. It's very clear. Passive goodness is supporting the evil. Right? Power without morality is Duryodhana's greed. And of course, choosing the wisdom over ego, Krishna stands for it. Victory of dharma is justice may be delayed but remains necessary. It is delayed to an extent where there's a lot of loss of lives. And the key takeaway is that he talks about, Suktankar talks about, Mahabharata is not only about who wins a war, but about whether human beings choose dharma when faced with injustice, temptation, fear, and power. So it's ethical life or dharmic life is not just about intentions. I think good and I wish good for all. Dharma says that's not good enough. Ethical life requires not only intention that is good, but the courage to act when dharma is threatened. Not only it requires self-awareness, but also the knowledge of what is right and what is wrong, and how to classify actions. On the third, or the metaphysical plane, is talking about Adhyatma. Okay, and until this point, do you have a question? Any comment? So any question as to how is he getting all these meanings? Actually, it's scattered, and these meanings are available even prior to Suktankar, but he integrates all of that. Even quotes the text called Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya by Acharya Madhva, where he has identified the three layers of meanings, and Suktankar quotes him while writing this essay. And of course, everything that in each of those meanings, three layers of meanings, they are, just all what differs is just the first layer of meaning, which is the direct meaning. In modern life, there may not be you don't see a person called Duryodhana, a person called Yudhishthira. But when it comes to the second and the third layers, you do see connection to the modern life. Okay. So let's go back to the metaphysical plane. And here is where the entire battlefield is seen as inner struggle of the soul, or the Atma, or the Jivatma. So Kurukshetra. Kuru is action, right? Doing, Kuru, do. Or Kshetra is the field. The field of action. What is the field of action? It's the body. And in that body, there are forces that bind the Jivatma, or the soul, which is mainly Rajas, if you see. Greed comes from the desire or the ambition of craving and attachment, raga and the dvesha. Okay, so greed is raga. It's a craving which has gone beyond needs and wants. You want more, you want more, and you want more. You want to prevent some other person getting it, and you want more. See, there are actually even economic theories such as greed is good. Okay, if you look it up, you do get it. Right. And then humiliation. Humiliation, you do see that Rajas wants more power over others. If you have a very high Rajasic, uncontrolled Rajasic quality, it's about gaining power over others. And Tamas lacks compassion and moral awareness. Moral awareness doesn't exist when it is combined. So Rajas and Tamas are pretty high. And at that point, a person starts humiliating others, which happened in case of Kauravas humiliating Pandavas and also Draupadi. Deception, where Rajas and Tamas are playing the role, where Rajas seeks the personal gain and Tamas hides truth and creates that confusion. When Rajas is too high, the danger of Rajas, when it goes beyond limits, as such, it has no limits, right? It can keep on growing. In the realm of Rajas being high, you see dharma as adharma and adharma as dharma. That kind of confusion will happen. It can happen or it may happen, but it will happen. And blindness, where Dhritarashtra is the symbol for that thing, it's not just physical blindness, but moral blindness, refusing to see dharma. That you just become blind. And in the same Kurukshetra, you do see Pandavas representing higher tendencies. Is the justice, which is sattva. It seeks balance, fairness, and moral clarity. Truth is one of the clearest signs of sattvic understanding, and you do see that in the Pandavas. And courage, sattva guided rajas. And you see, rajas and the tamas should always be subordinated to sattva, and that you would see. Courage needs action, so it uses rajas. But when guided by wisdom, it serves dharma. Otherwise, it won't. Restraint. See, the same tamas, when tamas is too high, it was silent and it was inaction. But restraint in sattva, it means self-control. A sattvic person is also not acting in certain circumstances, but that comes out of self-control, discipline, and the freedom from selfish impulse. So many times, a rishi's restraint is not same as a Kumbhakarna's tamas, even though at the outset they appear inactive. And the Kurukshetra, as the inner battlefield, is the human body. Kurukshetra, the realm of action. It is mind-body complex where higher and lower tendencies struggle all the time. And Arjuna is represented as the individual self, or the Jivatma. He represents many times Rajasic or the sattvic ego, right? He represents the human soul in crisis, confused, emotionally shaken, and unable to act. And here Krishna, as the supreme self, is divine. It's divine wisdom. He is in the form of divine wisdom and higher self, guiding the individual toward right action and liberation. The Kauravas has lower tendencies. They symbolize the desire ego, just like what we saw. And the Pandavas is the higher tendencies. And Bhagavad Gita becomes the key. The Gita teaches how to act without attachment, action without attachment, overcoming confusion, and unite action with knowledge and devotion. So, on the metaphysical plane, Suktankar finds the parallel of Kurukshetra to the inner battlefield, and the modern application from our point of view is that our daily moral and emotional struggle is in the realm of Kurukshetra. Arjuna is a confused individual self. Whenever we are in the moments of doubt, fear, or crisis, that confused individual soul, think of Arjuna. Krishna, the higher wisdom, that's the conscience, spiritual guidance, and inner clarity. Kauravas, the lower self, the ego of jealousy, the ego of anger, greed, all of that. That represents the ego getting attached to negative emotions. Pandavas, the same ego, its higher self, getting attached to discipline, truth, courage, and dharma, but definitely elevated, still in the sattvic mode. War is the inner struggle, choosing wisdom over impulse. In all of these examples, you don't see good versus evil. You don't see God versus devil. It's the same person representing different kinds of attributes, as you see. So his lecture presents the entire Mahabharata as a spiritual allegory in which the real battlefield is the human soul, and the real victory is the triumph of higher wisdom over ego, desire, and ignorance. So it's not just a war outside, but a map of the journey from ignorance to self-knowledge. So at this point, any question or any comment?
Gee, question. You mentioned about dharma being seen as adharma and then vice versa. So, you have an example of, how that was. One thing is being blindness is one thing you mentioned, but then
Mhm.
like recognizing dharma and adharma, like how is misinterpreted, not just in the society, but even within our own self. Sometimes, oh, this is sort of the norm, and you should kind of accept it. Sometimes,
Yeah, I mean, all actions we think that we are executing something logically, but you can be logical. You can be rationalizing. Rationalizing is an example where you think you are right, or you retroactively you apply many things and then say why you did is actually what you tried explaining what you meant, but it would have resulted in something pretty bad. When as an example, which everybody knows, see, Duryodhana was trained by none other than Bhishma and Drona and all these people. They had the same teachers, right? Throughout, they had the same teachers. In fact, Duryodhana had better access to Bhishma and Drona and all these people. And he says that janami dharmam, janami adharmam. I know what is right and what is not. But whatever I am doing, I'm just guided by the inner self. Hridisthitena devena yatha niyuktosmi tatha karomi. Yena kena devena. Yena kena yena kena hridisthitena devena yatha niyuktosmi tatha karomi. Whatever he is guiding me, he is the inner dwelling God, and that's my conscience. That is what is guiding me, and that's why I'm doing it. So I know what is right, what is wrong. Don't try to tell me. He says that, right? So while in the mode, nobody is thinking that he is actually doing something evil. Everybody thinks that he's actually doing it. What he's doing is actually right, especially when rajas is high. That is one example. And you can look at many of the history, the characters in political history or otherwise. You do see many actions were justified as right.
So, gee, by having the rajas high, if I'm saying I'm right because I'm guided by so and so, like, and I always make these decisions the right way, uh, I'm self-imposing, or maybe I'm making a statement of not just through the rajasic behavior I have or exhibiting that behavior. Um, that also seems to push the agenda, right?
Yes.
And that's sort of what
that
you're
that
saying.
is, yeah, it is all about raga and dvesha. Raga is that attachment to that outcome. I want it no matter what. I want to win. So whatever is being done, it's not for no. The dharma is the should be the outcome. It's about I want to win. So that is when dharma is compromised.
Anyone?
And it's not easy to identify. Just saying it is easy. Having self-awareness is really hard. Okay. So all three gunas exist in everyone. The real question is not whether they exist, but which guna is dominating, right? And these three gunas, as we see, the mental state of the sattva is to be calm, lucid, and balanced. So how do you identify? If you ask the question, how do I know that I am in the sattvic mode? Ask yourself, are you calm, lucid, or balanced? Are you rajasic? Ask yourself, am I acting restless, highly driven, and attached? And that's because of The rajas itself is activity, dynamism, and desire. The typical expression is ambition, craving, and an agitated person, agitation in physical actions. So, how does tamas exhibit? In theory, it is inertia and darkness, right? The mental state is it's dullness, confused and avoidant, right? Uh, but the expression comes out as ignorance, laziness, and complete blindness, mental blindness. So, dharma and adharma are the ethical qualities that are mapping to the gunas. For example, adharma, the greed, is mainly rajas, desire, ambition, craving, and attachment. Humiliation is mainly by rajas and tamas, right? Power. Deception is again rajas and tamas for personal gain. That hiding the truth, that is when tamas is very high. Blindness is mainly tamas. Very, very tamasic person was Dhritarashtra there. He was the main villain, the entire epic. So dharma is all about sattva, dhina, rajas, and tamas. Sattva guiding the action of the rajas. Dharma is rajas and tamas ruling the action. Simple, no good and evil, but the imbalance of the gunas. And when it comes to application of real life, it is the guna dominance in application. If you see this, if the situation is study and learning, sattva helps clarity and focus. Tamas causes dullness, career, and ambition. Rajas gives the drive, but sattva must guide it ethically. Conflict and anger, if the situation you perceive is conflict and anger, you can find the root cause, that is rajas inflaming reactions, tamas hardening and hardens ignorance. Sattva is the one that is an enabler of restraint. Leadership, if that is the situation, sattva seeks justice, rajas is seeking power. Tamas is avoiding responsibility altogether. In the applications of media, habits, and lifestyle, repeated choices strengthen one guna over the others. Now you bring in Mimamsa and why they say small decisions matter. Why they talk about the tyranny of small decisions. Why they are always stressing that vidhi and nisheda. Repeated choices strengthen one guna over the others. And cultivating sattva is about a truthful speech, disciplined action, and swadhyaya, or studying the shastras, and also self-reflection. And how do you control that environment, which is very difficult? Seek good company, satsanga, they say, right? Because that's a motivator. That helps in growing self-awareness, which helps in moderation, restraint, and clarity of thought and speech. Helps in a better life. So the key takeaway is that sattva, rajas, tamas are all present in human nature. Ethical life begins when we recognize each guna with awareness, in active and consciously allow sattva to guide action. So sattva may provide energy, but tamas clouds judgment. Together, you start confusing one over the other, that is confusing adharma over dharma. Adharma appears as good. So sattva brings clarity. Dharma arises when action is illuminated by sattva. But this is another chapter. It guides how it actually enters into the topic of Kavya Shastras, and where they start talking about different types of meanings. And you see there is direct meaning, secondary meaning, and implied meaning or suggestive meaning. Uh, Direct meaning is like, bring the cow. And you do understand. It's like the dictionary meaning. The cow directly means animal cow, which is called abhida or direct meaning. Sun has risen. The sun directly means the celestial body sun over there. It's risen. So we understand it, direct meaning. The Actually, if you see that, if you somehow apply that to Mahabharata, the story, the narrative, if you see it directly, that's what it's going to appear like. But the Lakshana, or the indicative meaning, is suppose somebody says, there's a village on the Ganga. Gangayam Ghoshaha is one such example. Uh, literally, there cannot be a village on the river. So the direct meaning goes against our experience. But you do understand what it means. It means there is a village on the banks of Ganga. Right? That is called Lakshana. For example, we say that in daily language, oh, the kettle is boiling. But literally, the instrument kettle is not boiling, but the water inside is boiling. So human speech is many times, many times, direct or indicative. There is also another type of meaning that is called Vyanjana, when it is beyond the direct and the indicative. It is far deeper and very subtle, but emotionally understood. Let's say, someone says, or you read poetry, read a line in a story or hear it. The moon has risen and the garden is silent. The direct meaning is like moon is up over there in the sky and the garden is all quiet and nobody's making any noise. But that is not there is an emotion. It is unsaid, but it's understood. Unsaid, understood. It's neither direct nor indicative, but emotionally understood. It's the mood of romance, peace, longing, or separation. For example, she looked at the path. She looked through the window again and again and again and again. She kept touching the watch multiple times, maybe her husband's watch, or maybe her kid's watch. So the suggested meaning is she's waiting for someone beloved. So this is emotionally understood. So each sentence can have a direct, indicative, or vyanjana. But what if the entire epic is seen through that lens? Right? In the direct meaning, there's a literal story. The indicative meaning, it's a moral meaning, dharma and dharma. But in the vyanjana, or the suggestive meaning, it is suggesting far deeper. Kurukshetra becomes the inner battlefield. Krishna guiding Arjuna from the confusion to wisdom. So epic as a narrative event is direct. Epic as ethical teaching is lakshana, or the indicative meaning. The epic as inner transformation is the vyanjana. So what happened may be direct. What does it teach is lakshana, or indicative. And what does it awaken within us is vyanjana. Therefore, the Mahabharata example in one line, there may be a war outside the story, but a moral struggle within society and an inner battle within the human soul. And this is the reason Mahabharata is still living. And every person, every member of the family, many times, you see they are named after the characters of Mahabharata. With that thing, any more questions?
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of touch upon the other characters in the Mahabharata. Like for example, Gandhari, right? Other advisors to Dhritarashtra, any other ministers, right? People who were in somewhat of an influential position,
Mhm.
but were they also impacted by inertia, tamas, or is it like
Every person there. Yes, every person. Yeah, and it can be mapped. I mean, all open for research and more and more insights. Every time you read Mahabharata, it gives you layers and layers of meaning. That's why it's called a Dhvani Kavya. And that is the reason they exist. It might have been written 5,000 years ago, but the bhava, the emotion of that character, as long as the emotions are there existing in humans, these epics are relevant. Yes, DC Modia.
G, excellent explanation, G. So there are Dhritarashtra's and then Gandharis, all around. Uh, so there's no way to stimulate or have them change or anything, right? They're going to act the way they act, right? So influential or somebody who's outside the conflict, or maybe driving the conflict and not being really caring about sort of reaching a resolution. So we see those characters, like, at least from our human brain, we think like, oh, we trying to keep a dharma check and the triguna check on ourselves, and then what matters to us most is self balance and self
Yes, yes.
dharmic and everything else. So how would you disregard those unwanted chaos in our lives? Because I can operate in my state of peace, which is more important and more of a priority than dealing with these, Gandharis and Dhritarashtras in our lifetime. Like, why even mess with these things, right? So, be with a small conflict or larger conflict, like, So that's typically, happens. I see it, but at what point do you act upon it is the main thing. Because the Kurukshetra is self, like the slide says, like, start with yourself and then be
Starting with yourself. Yes.
right. So if that is satisfied, why even go beyond and leaving your peace and deal with people who don't have any intention, don't have any regard to the reverence to start with, so let alone be the respect for any kind of a situational conflict, right? Why even mess with that is the constant thing that, like, what, I can pray for you for your betterment, and
Yes.
I love the family,
Yeah.
I love the people, I will pray for you, which I do. But why even indulge in something that is going to dismantle my balance?
See, the things, events, and people, they happen as they happen. It is the experience of it, experience of things, events, and people. The experience is within you, and that can be changed. That's the whole point. And when yatha bhava tata drushtihi, whatever is your emotional state, that's how you're going to see it. So, and you do see those examples in the Bharata, the Mahabharata.
So ultimately, it's the experience of the self. That's what we're going after.
Yes.
Through the experience, like, what do we do? And what are the choices we make?
Yeah, you can only change your experience and your reaction. Which, yeah, if you change your experience from comparison and jealousy to wonderment and appreciation, the whole thing changes. A little that switch.
So would you rather take in doses and say we test out the water and try to resolve or try to you know, like in when there, you know that the environment is such that, you know, people are already behaving for the past 5 years or 10 years in such a
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
So do you do like a testing strategy and say, let's try to do this, let's make this small tweak, see what happens?
Maybe you can try it. I mean, there's no harm in figuring out an action, a particular course of action by unit testing it. Yeah, and if it has to result in a collective action, you do invest a lot of time, and
Yeah.
transforming a person versus transforming a society, it's a different scale.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, there's a fine line between sanity and insanity. You can try different dosage, different techniques, but if the result is the same, then you know, kind of know, like, it's a moot point.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
are close to the end of the time, so we'll take one question from Darshan Mahoday. Last question.
Uh, thank you, Mother.
Stop the
Sriniviji,
recording.
so
Or?
We'll continue the
Oh,
recording
okay. Yeah,
after
please
this.
go. Please go ahead, Darshanji.
sure. Yeah. My question is more from the practical parenting perspective. So, especially here in our environment in US, parents go through this dilemma, and there are different ways of parenting as well. So, from the dharma, adharma, and all these ethics perspective, and all the knowledge that we have gained, how do we look at it? So, for example, individually also we go through this dilemma: is,
Mhm.
hey, should we give importance to um, material things or career, and how do we uh, what kind of uh, material possessions that we gain through education and all that,
Mhm.
versus knowledge of dharma, knowledge of values and stuff like that. So, some parents will argue that, hey, we came from a very humble background, so our main goal is to reach a better position in terms of materialistic gains, or
Mhm.
making good money, becoming rich,
Mhm.
and stuff like
Person.
that.
Yeah.
And the other thing would be, hey, um, we have come to a society where there are different values. The
Mhm.
society is a little bit different than where we come from. So, why do we keep thinking about all those values which does not work over here in a broader sense? The society works in a completely different manner. So we need to focus on these values. And even from the kids' perspective, it might be looked upon as a, hey, orthodox kind of thinking from my
Mhm.
parents. These are very oldish kind of thoughts, and all these things that you're talking about does not make
Mhm.
sense in the modern society. The term modern is quite frequently used. So
Mhm.
the dharma and adharma completely gets wiped out here. The terms which are used are completely different. And so I don't know, like, sometimes you're talking to a parent and you're talking in the aspect of parenting, but the terms that are being used are completely different. So I don't know. In that sense, the in the next generation, these concepts would completely go away, right? Uh, if those concepts are not rooted or not taught.
Mhm.
So I don't know how from the parenting perspective, how should this be taken up?
I think it all depends on place and circumstances. And, civilization is knowledge centric and culture is value centric. So, coming from Bharat, right? And just because you say it's value centric, it doesn't mean that the rules of the society somehow don't align with the values. Many times they do. Yes, when you come to Purushartha, so the Artha and the Kama can be a lot more on a higher pedestal because than Dharma and the Moksha. And that's common everywhere. I think it needs to be seen not the outer world as the primal cause, but whatever is under the control of the parents and what the kid can be given, they are in a much better situation if Artha is taken care. And the moment Artha is not taken care, there is no Dharma too. So it is, Chanakya says, Dharmasya moolam Artha. So Kama and the Artha, the desire and the means to achieve the Kama, the wants and the needs, they have to be given importance. But what he says is, it has to be under balance, sandwiched or anchored to Dharma and Moksha. So it's not like you have to let go and be whatever it is. It's just they need to be anchored. And to individually, it's all about developing self-awareness. In a familial sense, teaching self-awareness and making sure that it's not just the yoga, dhyana, but also the shastra, the instructions that have been discovered over millennia. That can be a guiding manual or a guiding force.
Yes, yeah. So probably you just need to change your vocabulary a little bit. If you keep talking about dharma and adharma, they probably are not going to
They
understand.
probably, it's like, yes, you have to, even though they're all values, language is nothing but the change in the form of words and sounds, right? So you have to customize it. So, yeah, the framework is there, but it's the application that differs. Swarupa is same, Rupa is different. Substance
Thank
and
you, Jay.
forms.
Thank you. Dhanyawad.
Then,
Dhanyawad.
Dhanyawad, everybody. Let us conclude with the Shanti Mantra. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. I'll stop recording. Dhanyawad, everybody.